Welcome to episode 86 of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent writing crime fiction inspired by true crime FBI cases. Today we get to speak to retired agent Kevin Miles, who served in the FBI for 23 years. As the FBI's first officially assigned full-time Special Agent Bomb Technician, SABT, he spent more than 17 years acquiring extensive experience in the field of improvised explosive devices and post-blast investigations. In this episode, Kevin Miles reviews the duties of a post-blast bomb technician, processing and investigating explosive crime scenes, such as the bombing of the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia in 1996 and the Maldives Al-Qaeda bombing in 2007. Kevin Miles is a past executive director of the International Association of Bomb Technicians and Investigators. He has traveled to 65 countries in 48 states, including multiple deployments to high-risk areas such as Afghanistan and Pakistan, and has taught more than 9,000 students from around the world on the intricacies involved with bombing investigations. In 2010, he was named as an FBI Master Special Agent Bomb Technician, and he has published numerous articles and research papers on explosive devices and post-blast investigations. He has also received numerous awards for his service to the first responder community. Currently, Kevin Miles is a lecturer at Eastern Kentucky University's School of Safety, Security, and Emergency Management. I love learning new things, and there's so much about explosives and bombings that I just didn't know, and Kevin really does a great job of telling us all about post-blast investigations. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Before we get to the interview, I have an important announcement. I will not be posting an episode next week. So when you wake up Friday morning, October the 6th, there will not be a new episode. I will be in Spain. My husband and I are taking a 12-day vacation to Costa del Sol of Spain, and we'll be in Marbella, and we'll be taking day trips to Sevilla, Cordoba, Granada, Tangiers, and Ronda. I can't wait. Now, I know it's short notice, but I did see that I do have listeners who live in the Andalusia region of Spain. If there's any way that we can arrange it, I would love to meet you in person. I will be getting out my monthly email on the FBI and books, TV, and movies. I'll get that out a little later, maybe around the 5th or the 6th of October. That way, I'll be able to include a few photos from Spain. One of my goals is to speak with somebody in law enforcement in Spain to get an idea of what things we have in common between the FBI and the equivalent agency in Spain. If you're not a member of the FBI Retired Case File Review Reader Team and you want to get that email on the FBI and books, TV, and movies, all you need to do is go to my website, jerrywilliams.com, and sign up when you see the pop-up. As part of my monthly email, you'll also receive the FBI Reading Resource, which is a list of all of the books about the FBI written exclusively by the FBI agents who have appeared on this podcast. The Reading Resource right now is up to 30 books: crime fiction, true crime, and memoir. I want to thank you for all the emails that I've received congratulating me for releasing the audiobook of Pay to Play and for reaching 1 million episode downloads for the podcast. During this week's episode, my dog Canyon makes a cameo. You'll hear him barking hello. Last thing, I want to thank those of you who have picked up a copy of Pay to Play. When you pick up a copy of my FBI crime thriller, you're helping to defray the cost of me putting out ad-free content on a weekly basis. So, thank you. Now here's the show. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Kevin Miles. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. Now, I learned about you from someone on LinkedIn, Tom Vale, who has been listening to FBI Retired Case File Review, and he sent me a note and he said, you need to interview Kevin Miles about being a bomb tech.
I've known Tommy many years.
Well, look, when I get a recommendation from somebody who listens to the show, I go right out and try to connect with that retired agent to see if they're interested. Most of the time, everybody says absolutely yes. You said yes, so here we are.
Well, I'm very flattered, and quite frankly, I had never even heard of a podcast until you reached out to me, so I'm happy to be here.
Okay. Well, good. See, now I taught you something, so
exactly.
You're going to reciprocate, and you're going to teach us everything, which is
anything
good.
You want to know.
Yeah, because, well, the good thing about this is I know nothing other than really liking the movie Hurt Locker.
Oh, okay.
Did you see it?
I was given, I actually watched that movie in a small theater in Beverly Hills, California, when it first, actually before it came out.
Oh, excuse us.
Yeah, and I was invited by the 60 Minutes, the news show 60 Minutes, to come and view it with a whole bunch of other military bomb technicians who obviously were, part of that movie, and to get our take on it and to watch it. Actually, the director was there, and the writer, Mark Bowl, was there as well, and we watched it, and I'll reserve judgment on
okay.
it.
I really liked the movie, but I guess, that's going to be great because you're going to be able to tell us some of the things that, were misconceptions. So let's get into this. Why would anybody in the world want to become a bomb tech? It sounds like a very dangerous occupation to me.
Well, believe it or not, I first was exposed to this with explosives when I was in the Marine Corps about 1,000 years ago. I had no experience with explosives, not even firecrackers when I grew up in New York City. I was a good kid. My mother says a great kid. I never played with fireworks during the 4th of July. And it just so happened when I joined the Marine Corps, they put me into an area of specialty that dealt with explosives. And I learned about explosives back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was fascinated by it. And all real Americans love blowing things up and seeing things blow up. So after I got out of the Marine Corps, I decided to keep doing it and got in the police department in Oklahoma and got in the bomb squad and just went from there. And it's not as dangerous as people think. Back in the olden days, before robots, before bomb suits, it was pretty dangerous. You didn't have the equipment that you have nowadays. All that people know about bomb squads and bomb technicians is what they see in the movies, i.e. the Hurt Locker, where, the people are doing things that in real life are very rarely, if ever, done anymore. And so, in a lot of ways, being a police officer or a firefighter is even more dangerous than being a bomb technician because, we know what we're doing, we know what we're facing, we have the equipment, we have the training, and we know what we're getting into. So, it's a dangerous job, but it's not as dangerous as it used to be. When I first came on the bomb squad, we didn't have robots. We didn't have robots, and we didn't have anywhere near the equipment we have now. And there was a lot of what's called hand entry, which means actually putting your hands on suspected IEDs or real IEDs and taking it apart by hand. That's not done anymore. And if it is, it's a very, very, very rare occurrence. So anyway, it was very fascinating to me. And I've done it now for coming up on 30 years of being a bomb technician.
And how much of that time was actually in the FBI?
23 of it. Yeah, I did 23 years. I was I was the very first, as far as I know, it's what I've been told anyway, I was the first officially recognized on bureau paper full-time FBI bomb technician. We were called, still are called SABT, Special Agent Bomb Technicians. I got to Los Angeles field office in 1995, and I was the only bomb tech in LA at the time, so they made me a full-time bomb tech on paper, and I stayed that way for the next 17 years until I retired.
Wow. Yeah, so for the listeners, just by way of explanation, there are many, many jobs like bomb techs in the FBI where it is a collateral duty. Now, you are an investigator, an agent, you're working cases, you're on a squad, and then you have this collateral duty, like an ERT, an evidence response team member, where if something happens, you go out. And
right.
You're right. And most of the time, somebody who was a bomb tech or explosive expert in the field, they did that part-time.
Correct. Now, when you and I came on the job those many years ago, that was absolutely true. There were very few full-time specialty entities. And nowadays, though, this is 27 years later, there are a lot of full-time SABTs, a lot of full-time SWAT officers. There's a lot more full-time collateral. Actually, it's not collateral anymore. It's all full-time now. But for a long time, I was the only one. And then a couple of the bigger cities, they started going into full-time positions. And now, with the exception of the really small offices, which like Norfolk and Springfield, some of the small towns, they just can't afford to have a guy full-time or, an agent full-time in some of these collateral duties. But the big offices, I had 9 people assigned to me. I had 9 full-time SABTs in Los Angeles when I retired. And, that's unheard of back in the day. But now it's quite common. Some of the bigger field offices like New York, Washington, Chicago, they have multiple full-time SABTs.
All right. So what would you do on a daily basis? What kind of work is there for 9 people and a team leader?
Well, I was the team leader. I was the so-called not official supervisor, but I managed the entire program. And of course, I had all the administrative stuff I had to do, budgets and training issues and coverage. We had 7 counties in Los Angeles we were responsible for. Actually, we had more than that. We had 8 counties we were responsible for. We took Kern County, California, which was technically Sacramento Division, but they were a lot closer to us than Sacramento, so we took them under our wing. So we had a lot of bomb squads we had a liaison with. We would routinely go out on bomb calls. We had 12 civilian bomb squads in Los Angeles field office we were responsible for, and 7 military. So that's 19 bomb squads in Southern California we were responsible for. So anytime one of those squads would get a call, which was often, 4 or 5 times a day, we would go out on calls. And sometimes it had a federal nexus. Most times it did not. But we had such good relations with our bomb squads, I would say, hey, do one of your guys want to come with us on the suspicious package call at the courthouse? Absolutely. So I'd send one of my guys there, and they'd respond to the call with the local squad. We also had an enormous amount of training we did. We had the FBI's large vehicle bomb post-blast school that was run out of LA Division. We had the underwater post-blast crime scene school, which was run out of Los Angeles field office by my crew. We had the tactical post-blast, which is a crime scene school for individuals who were about to be deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq, and we trained them how to process a bombing crime scene in under 20 minutes. We also had the basic post-blast crime scene school. We did a lot of schools there, and we were kind of like the clearinghouse for most of the post-blast training in the United States. So, and we'd have maybe 1, sometimes 2 week-long schools a month for many, many years. So we did a lot of that as well. Did a lot of dog and pony shows. With those, being in Philadelphia field office, I'm sure you went to some of them. We also had we had more special events in Los Angeles field office than anybody else. We had to support the local bomb squads with the Academy Awards, the Emmy Awards, the Grammy Awards, the Rose Bowl parade, the Rose Bowl game, any kind of all-star game that would come in. I think I did 2 baseball all-star games. While I was there, I did 2 Super Bowls. I did 1 NBA championship. So we did a lot of special events. I think I did 75 special events in the 17 years I was in Los Angeles. So we were very, very busy, more so than any other field office in the Bureau during my time. A lot of stuff going on.
All right, so I guess you could break it down into different situations where you have first just a call about a suspicious activity or a suspicious package. Then, as you call it, post-blast, where there has been a bombing and you're going in after the fact. And then I guess there is just the testimony and the evidence when you have done your job, and now you are taking that to the next step and trying to convict somebody, of being involved in the bomb. Could you take us through those 3 steps, or are there more than 3 steps?
No, essentially you've got what's called left of boom and right of boom.
Oh,
left
I like
of
that.
boom. Left of boom is everything you've done before the suspicious package or IED functions as designed. And this, thankfully we don't live in Iraq or Afghanistan. This is a big country, but we really don't get a lot of actual IEDs compared to other countries. I mean, we get a lot. We're a huge country, but, we don't have the devices that other areas of the world are seeing, thankfully, up to this point anyway. So a lot of bomb squads get called out on suspicious packages that really they don't know what it is. So we'll go out there, and it's all remote now. Back in the day, we would actually walk up on these things wearing a bomb suit, carrying X-ray. But now, FBI now actually runs the Hazardous Devices School down in Huntsville, Alabama, which is the only school for civilian bomb technicians in America. And they mandate that every certified bomb squad in America, there's about 475 of them now, have to have at least 1 robot. So we use the robots much more extensively than we used to, because, a lot of bomb squads didn't have robots. So we send the robot down there, and we will do as much as we can remotely before we actually send a bomb technician up on the device. So once we've done that and we successfully render the device safe, or we determine that it's not an IED, we move on. Then we've got right of boom. That means the device has functioned before the bomb squad has gotten there, and now we have a crime scene. So then we use, bomb technicians as specialists. Okay, back in the day, back before 1995, in the Bureau anyway, any kind of bombing crime scene would be run, but would be supervised by a SABT, by a bomb technician. After Oklahoma City, that changed, and now any kind of bombing crime scene is managed by ERT, as you mentioned, Evidence Response Team, and we as bomb technicians then become specialists. We help out, but we don't run things. And at that point, we become the quote-unquote experts, and we supervise and watch as the crime scenes are processed by the Evidence Response Team, all of whom have to be post-blast trained now. Again, before 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing was the case study for the FBI bomb program in a lot of ways. And now ERT, Evidence Response Teams in the Bureau, if you're going to work a bombing crime scene, you have to be trained in post-blast investigation, either through an FBI school or some sort of post-blast training. You can't just go out there and go, okay, I'm here. You just can't work it with no experience. So we will watch as those specialists process the scene meticulously, and the evidence is recovered. We take a look at it and say, okay, that's not part of it. That is part of it. Get rid of that. Keep that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then when it comes to testimony, again, we assist the U.S. Attorney's Office or whoever, okay, because SABTs are also called out on non-federal bombings. We'll assist the local police departments or sheriff's departments and bomb squads with their crime scenes. And I've testified numerous times in state court. Actually, I testified more in state court than I have in federal court, quite frankly. And so we help out and we become basically expert witnesses. And we will be asked to explain how the device was constructed, how it functioned, what it was made out of, and things like that. And I did that actually quite a lot. I testified twice in the World Trade Center in '93. And, like I said, a lot of times in state court. A lot of these bombings don't rise to the federal level, but we go out on them anyway with the locals and assist them in any way we can.
Wow. So could you tell me what I would learn? What would be the goal of to accomplish if I went to a post-blast training?
Well, it depends on what kind of school you went to. There's several kinds that I used to run when I was in LA. There was the basic post-blast crime scene. That is when you have literally no experience whatsoever in explosives or bombs or anything like that. And we start out with basically, this is an explosive. This is an explosive device. This is what explosives do. It's a very, very basic instruction. The crime scenes are very small, probably under a pound each. So, because the goal for the basic course is to have the students find something. Okay, we don't want to blow the thing into oblivion and have them wander around the desert for 2 days and find nothing at all. That's demoralizing. But we try to make it as realistic as we can, and we teach them how to process the scene. We teach them how to avoid contamination, which is a huge issue in this country and other parts of the world. Could
you explain that?
Well, what you do not want to do is contaminate your evidence. Okay, that crime scene from the minute it detonates, from the minute the device detonates, is contaminated. What you, as a crime scene investigator, does not want to do is contaminate it further. So, for example, we are not allowed to bring our firearms into a explosive crime scene, because there's a possibility that we touch our firearms and transfer contamination from the bullets or residue on our firearms if we haven't cleaned our weapons since the last time we worked the firearms. Okay, you know how dirty your firearms get, right? Some of it's clean, some of it didn't. And you have a dirty firearm and you somehow touch it and you transfer that residue from your firearm onto a piece of evidence. That's not good. So we also do not. For example, we will wear Tyvek suits on a bombing crime scene, because bomb technicians by nature are contaminated all the time, because we deal with explosives all the time and every day sometimes, in my case anyway. So I would wear gloves, I'd have Tyvek suits on. I would always keep a brand new pair of boots in my response vehicle, because, the boots I wore during, day-to-day activity were on explosives ranges almost constantly. So the last thing I want to do is bring a dirty pair of boots onto an explosive crime scene. That opens up the defense attorney to questioning me about contamination, cross-contamination. So that's a big issue with us. And if you ever see a bombing crime scene like in Boston or recently at the mosque, you'll see the FBI or whomever else is there processing the scene. They're wearing those Tyvek paper suits. And that's the reason they're doing that, to keep contamination to a minimum. Now, you can't keep it away, completely, because, there's always going to be some in there, but you do what you can. You tell the jury, you tell the judge that you did the best you could to keep from contaminating that crime scene any further than it already is. So, and then you have the advanced, the graduate level post-blast school, and that's the one that we did in Los Angeles for many years, and that is the large vehicle bomb. This was a step above. Like I said, we'd have maybe 1 or 2 pounds of explosives in the basic school. In the graduate level, advanced or large vehicle bomb school, we would have hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds of explosives in a vehicle. And I had the luxury of being in Los Angeles, so I had the desert. I had very, very good relationships with my military EOD units like Tom Vail. We got along very well with the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. They all had huge bases out there in Southern California. And anytime I wanted to, blow something up a couple of 1,000 pounds, they'd say, yeah, come on out here, do it, and bring your students with you. So, and we would put, thousands of pounds of explosives in a deuce and a half or a tractor trailer or something like that, and have the students process that scene over a period of 2 to 3 days. Then if you were a diver, if you were a civilian diver or a military diver. We had the underwater post-blast school, which is basically a basic post-blast school only underwater. And it was open only to divers. You didn't have to be a bomb squad diver. You could be a regular, police diver who would be in a position to, dive and pick up pieces of IEDs. So we had that school. Then we had for the military, a lot of military guys took this. It was the combat zone post-blast or the tactical post-blast. And this was a 3.5-day course designed for individuals, EUD technicians mostly, FBI agents, anybody who was deploying overseas in a high-threat area where you only had minutes to process a crime scene and get in and get out. You don't have the luxury of being in, the U.S. where you have perimeters and lots of policemen to watch over you for days at a time. You got minutes, if any time at all, to get in there and process the scene and get out. So we had all 4 of those schools, and it was designed for different people and different, job skills and different job sets. And anybody who wanted to come out, I was also always, available to have them come out and process or go to the class. So that's what you're looking for. You're basically trying to reconstruct the IED. You painstakingly process the scene. Doing a post-blast crime scene is a long, laborious, dirty job. It's not like, a burglary or even a shooting. Your evidence is in little pieces, and you recognize what a gun looks like, but what does a gun look like when it's blown to pieces? What do the internal parts look like? That's what you're going to find out there. So it's a lot of specialized training to do that, and that's what we did during my career anyway. They're still doing it now. Not as much because I left.
So who are you working for now?
I just started a gig as a teacher at Eastern Kentucky University. And I'm teaching the post-blast crime scene, advanced and basic, in the only major, this is an actual major at a university in the world. You can actually major in arson and post-blast investigation at Eastern Kentucky University, and I am now a lecturer.
Oh, is this your first foray into this type of instruction?
It is my first foray into academia.
Oh.
And I'm a little nervous. Like I said, the vast majority, in fact, almost all of my students up to this point, about 10,000 of them over the years, are a lot older than college freshmen. And they are police officers, they're firefighters, they're FBI agents, with varying amounts of experience. So I've never really instructed and taught a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds. So this should be interesting. But like I said, I'm honored to be part of it. And as I said, it's the only actual, you can get a degree in this. It's the only university in the world that offers this degree to their students. So I'm pretty excited. This is going to be fun.
Well, I know one thing they would really enjoy. You talked about being able to go out in the desert and blow things up. And I looked on the FBI website, and I saw 2 videos. It's probably your guys blowing up stuff in the California desert. So it was pretty cool. I mean, you took little bits of explosives and different types of equipment, and we're just blowing things up. So I will link to those videos. I'll make sure that they're in this episode's show notes, so if anybody wants to go and look at that. It's pretty cool. I think 18-year-olds would really enjoy blowing things up. Are you going to be able to do that in class?
I cannot do that in Kentucky. Unfortunately, the range that I have at my disposal here outside of Richmond, Kentucky, is not anywhere near as large as what I had out 29 Palms or China Lake or Edwards Air Force Base. So I can't do the big, huge shots you see there on YouTube. And those videos are all over the place there. You put in Kevin Miles' large vehicle bomb post-blast school, you'll get to see those big, massive shots over the years. The biggest one I ever did was a little over 9,000 pounds in 29 Palms, California. And that was the largest shot I've ever done and it was one of the smallest classes I ever had. I only had like 25 students in that class, and normally my students, I'd have 40, 50, sometimes 60 students in the class because the crime scene was so massive. But these 25 guys and girls they worked their butts off for 3 days, and they found almost every bit of evidence I put in this 9,000-pound shot. And
what kind of things did you put in?
The IED. The IED I put in there. They recovered most of it, not all of it. They recovered enough to know what the IED was made out of. They recovered parts of the vehicle. The vehicle, there's no such thing as vaporization, unlike the movies where the truck vaporized. No, that doesn't happen. They found bits and pieces of the truck all over the desert. They found enough to identify the truck, which is what I wanted them to do. It was just very impressive to what 25 people can do with a shot like that. So, unfortunately, I can't do 9,000 pounds
in Kentucky.
In Kentucky, I'd be in prison in a week, in a day. So,
well, let's do two things. We're kind of halfway through the interview, and there's two things I'd like to do. First of all, I'd like to get a little technical, and if you could describe the different types of explosives for us. And then, because this is FBI retired case file review, I'd like to go over one or two of the major bombing cases that you were able to, go to and do your explosive expert work. So first of all, if you could tell us about the different types of explosives.
Well, explosives are broken down into many categories. There's high explosives and low explosives. High explosives, without getting into too technical detail, are explosives we've heard of, again, from the movies and books and things like that. That is dynamite, C4, TNT. Those are all the ones that your average citizen will recognize from, movies, right? Lethal Weapon and things like that, dopey movies like that. And they detonate. They don't explode. They detonate at high velocity.
What's the difference? What's the difference?
Well, there is a velocity that determines whether or not you have a high explosive or a low explosive. Velocity of detonation is the speed at which the detonation wave proceeds through the explosive itself. I'm getting into a little too much detail here, but in any event, any explosive that has a detonation velocity of 3,300 feet per second or more is considered a high explosive. Again, C4, TNT, dynamite, the ones we all have heard of. Any explosive that detonates or burns at below 3,300 feet per second is considered a low explosive. That includes what is almost universally referred to as gunpowder, okay? Gunpowder is the name we all know, and what really is black powder. The old black powder back in the day, smokeless powders, which we carried in our firearms in the FBI, and explosive light. Then you have further delineations. You have homemade explosives, and those are the ones that our enemies are using against us primarily. This is what McVeigh used in Oklahoma City. ANFO was a homemade explosive. You've got the peroxide-based explosives that are being used a lot overseas. Explosives called TATP and HMTD. I won't go over the real, long chemical formulas. Then you have what's called primary explosives and secondary explosives. Primary explosives are extremely sensitive explosives that are primarily only used in blasting caps. And blasting caps are what you need to set off a high explosive. If you don't have a blasting cap, and you have a high explosive in your hand, you've got a club because it's not going to do anything. So you've got those kind of things. And, again, there's a lot of explosives out there. But they come in, military explosives are explosives that Tom Vail uses that we mentioned earlier. And those are available primarily, in most cases, only to the military. And that includes C4 and TNT. And some military detonation cord, explosive rope, I used to call it. Then you have commercial explosives where, if you have the proper IED and the licenses and storage facilities, you can buy it on your own in the U.S. And those are the dynamites, the binary explosives, the emulsions, the water gels, the time fuse that you can only get from an explosives company in the U.S. There are only three ways to get explosives in the U.S. and pretty much anywhere else. You can either buy them, you can steal them, or you can make them. And that is what we're facing and have been facing for all these years. So, again, without getting into a whole class, there's a lot of different types of explosives out there. Some you can get, some you can't. If you can't get them, unfortunately, some people decide to make them. And we're seeing a lot of that, particularly overseas.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you about the cases that you worked overseas. But just real quick, if you could tell us, we know about the Unabomber. You know, those are bombs that, were exploded in the U.S. Of course, we know Oklahoma City bombing. What other bombings? Oh, what was the Olympics in Atlanta? That was a bombing, wasn't it?
Yes. I was not at the Olympics, the Olympic bombings. I was actually, that same time that happened, I was at TWA Flight 800 in New York, trying to figure out what brought that plane down. At one point, we thought, obviously for quite a while, we thought an IED brought that plane down. But myself and my friends from NYPD, pretty much all of them were retired by now. We were there the first 2 weeks of that scene, and every single item that was brought up from the bottom of that ocean was brought to us. And we looked at everything. Every bit of that plane was brought to us, and we looked for any kind of evidence of explosive violence, either to the plane itself or to, unfortunately, the victims. And we didn't find anything. So while that was going on, the Olympic Park bombing happened in Atlanta. So I was not on that one, but quite frankly, I came home from TWA after 2.5 weeks, and I was home for 24 hours, 1 day I was home for, and then Khobar Towers blew up in Saudi Arabia. And pretty much every FBI bomb technician who was not otherwise engaged was in Atlanta. So I got the call and go, "You're on your way to Saudi Arabia." So I just got home. So I had to pack my bags and got on a plane. And, LA to Saudi Arabia, that's a long flight. And so I got there and spent almost 30 days in Saudi Arabia working that bombing.
Well, tell us, when you got there, what was your objective? I mean, what were the things that you needed to gather, the information you needed to gather from that? And explain to everybody about what was blown up and who blew it up.
Well, as you know, the world is divided up into sections as far as the Bureau goes, okay? New York has the Middle East, or, actually Washington Field has the Middle East. New York has Africa, I think, and Europe. Miami has South America, and LA has the Pacific Rim. So the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, that was a WFO gig, a Washington Field Office gig. So they sent most of their JTTF out there, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, with the investigators. They sent their evidence response team, which back in those, this is in 1996. Now this is in June of '96, and they're very good. They were very experienced. So they went out there, and like I said, there was only 5 SABTs there. So our job was to basically stand by, and any piece of evidence that was recovered from the crater, which was massive, would come through us, and we would say, okay, that's possibly got some explosive, effects on, got some explosive residue on it. Hang on to that, keep that. That, on the other hand, is nothing. Get rid of it. This incident occurred. And you could tell that quickly just by eyeballing? Yeah, you can. You actually can. You can actually, if you're experienced bomb tech, can tell whether or not a piece of the vehicle, in this case, because we were looking for the vehicle parts, identify the vehicle, you can tell if a certain piece of that vehicle was close to the detonation. It's got certain effects that present itself, a piece of metal when it's really close to a seat of detonation. And we were looking for identification of the vehicle, like a VIN number, or something that would let us to, towards what kind of vehicle it was, for an investigative lead. So this incident occurred at night. This was a Hezbollah incident, and we didn't know this at the time. Remember now, I was a investigator, what I call the inside the hole kind of person. We're in the crater, we're pressing the scene. It's really irrelevant to us who did it and why it was done. It doesn't matter to us, really, one way or the other. We're going to process the scene no matter what. So, we weren't really privy to what was happening outside the hole, which means the investigators trying to find out who did it. We communicated with one another, but, we weren't getting a whole heck of a lot of cooperation from the Saudis at the time. Now, we come to find out later that this was a Hezbollah incident, and the vehicle was a septic tank truck, one of those, we used to call it a honey truck, cleaning out the septic tanks. And the vehicle was filled with about anywhere between 20 and 30,000 pounds of explosives, one of the largest improvised explosive devices ever made until that time. It was massive. And it pulled up to the Khobar Towers dormitory in Saudi Arabia, where the U.S. military was staying, and at the time they were enforcing the no-fly zone in southern Iraq. And a witness stated that he saw the truck pull around the building, back up to as close as he could. He got to the chain link fence. The witness actually heard the chain link fence rubbing up against the back of the truck. And the witness also stated he saw sparks, which we think might have been time fuse. We don't know for sure, where the truck driver lit the fuse. He got out of the vehicle, closed the door, got into a second vehicle. The second vehicle drove away. The witness, who was actually on top of the building, he was a military policeman, actually saved a lot of lives, it turns out. He recognized what was going on. He recognized possibly an IED, and he started, going from the roof down to each floor, telling people to get out of the building or at least go to the other side of the building, and he saved a whole bunch of lives. And the truck detonated, brought half the building down, and killed 19 U.S. servicemen and one local Saudi for a total of 20. And if you look at that picture, the first thing I noticed when I got there, and I remember now I didn't get there until, at least 18 hours, 24 hours after it occurred. So a lot of the scene had been picked up. A lot of the evidence was picked up by the Saudis before we got there. And the first thing I noticed when I got to the scene was how eerily similar it looked like Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at the picture of Oklahoma City, look at the picture of Saudi Arabia, Khobar Towers, with the exception of, I think the Khobar Towers was a couple of floors shorter than Oklahoma City. I'm not sure about that, but it looked just the same. Oh my God, I've been here before. So the next thing I remember about that scene is it was so hot. This was in June in Saudi Arabia, and I had never been to Saudi Arabia before, and I'm thinking Saudi equals heat equals no humidity. But we were on the Persian Gulf side. We were within sight of Iran, Bahrain. We could actually see them from where we were. And to this day, I have never been that hot or experienced that kind of humidity in my life.
What was the temperature?
The temperatures would get up to about 115 to 120, and the humidity was in the 90s. So you can imagine the worst day in Florida or Houston you could ever envision in your life, and double that. And it was
and
so
you're working
bad.
in a hole. And you're working in a hole.
It was so hot that we had to work the crime scene from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 in the morning. We could not work during the daytime because we'd all die. And I was one of the bomb technicians who had to go down in the crater. And the crater was probably 4 or 5 times the size of Oklahoma City. The crater, now remember now, you had hard red clay in Oklahoma City, and you had about anywhere from 4,800 to 7,200 pounds of explosives in that one. In Khobar Towers, you had anywhere from 20 to 30,000 pounds of high explosives in sand. So that sand evacuated, and that hole, when we got there, that crater was 85 feet wide and 35 feet deep. That's a 3.5-story building down into the ground. And it filled up. Before we got there, the Persian Gulf, somehow, we ruptured an aquifer, or they ruptured an aquifer, not we, the terrorists did, and the Persian Gulf came flooding into the hole, into the crater. So we had to dig at that crater, obviously, to find what's left of the vehicle. And we had to, thank God we had the engineers there, and they rigged up a system where the Persian Gulf was pushed out or sucked out of the crater, so we could get down there and process the scene. And that was a long crime scene. That was miserable. But again, we didn't find out until years later that Hezbollah and Iran were allegedly behind it, and there were some arrests in Saudi Arabia. We do know that. There were some people who went to prison in Saudi Arabia, and whether or not they were the right people, I don't know. But that was a tough crime scene, and again, it was a perfect evidence, an example of how truly awful a bombing crime scene can be, because you're out there a long time and you're getting dirty, and a lot of people were dropping from heat illnesses. It was a difficult scene. I will say this: the Saudis, some of the Saudis who were there spoke better English than I did. They were all American educated, and everything that I did, I was one of the only U.S. personnel allowed out of the Khobar Towers complex and into the actual town of Dhahran. I was supposed to do some crimes investigation in the city, and I had all the Saudi police with me, and a lot of them were American educated and very friendly, but they want to know every single solitary thing I was doing. They actually filmed me doing what I was doing, which was kind of strange.
To learn from you, or because they didn't trust you?
To learn. Well, I was hoping to learn, because I asked that. I said, why are you guys filming? Because we want to see what you're doing so we can do it. I said, all right. I'll take them at their word.
And in that particular case, you knew what type of vehicle it was because you had a witness. So you were trying
to... helped.
Mm-hmm.
That helped. Thank God we had that, because he was the only witness we had that we had available to us. Now, there were a lot of Saudi witnesses, but I didn't have access to them. The only guy I had access to was that young Air Force sergeant who saw the whole thing. And so we knew going in we were looking at a honey truck or a septic tank truck, which obviously helped. But sometimes you won't have anything at all. You just have a big hole in the ground. Now you got to figure out what happened.
Were they able to use the information that you got about that vehicle from the blast in order to identify the people who were responsible? Do you know?
Yes. Now, I didn't know any of this, until a long time after I got home. I never knew any of this because there were a lot. I remember Louis Free, who was the director at the time, I'll never forget this. Louis Free, who was our director at the time, visited. We were having some issues with the Saudis and the government. So Louis Free flew out to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, and one night I'm there working, sweating, miserable, and I look up and I see Louis Free in a nice, crisp suit. And I'm going, what in the world is he doing here? Now, again, I had no idea why he was there. I thought he was just visiting the troops. Come to find out a long time ago, he's trying to get things squared away between us and the Saudi government. But I'll never forget, he actually, he was always so impeccably dressed, and he had his tie up. He didn't have his tie loose. He was and it was just blazing hot. And he's there, and wasn't even sweating, and visited the troops as we were working the scene. So, again, I never knew any of this stuff until a long time after I got home. Again, they did have some suspects, and somebody went to jail. It was, I don't know any more than that. And, most crime scene investigators don't. know any more than that.
I can understand that. You come in and do your job, and by the time they're developing that part of the case, you've moved on.
We're gone.
Yeah.
We're gone. Yeah, And like I said, the way I teach it is, it's mildly interesting to me as a crime scene investigator who did it and why it was done. I can't say I don't care. I do care, especially if my countrymen are killed. But in reality, it's not going to change the way I do my job. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. I process the scene like I'm trained to do, and once I'm done with it, I move on.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And the whole reason that the FBI was the agency there investigating this is that extraterritorial jurisdiction that we have. And we've talked about that before. I think episode 16, John Cosenza, I don't know if you know John, but he talked a little bit about being there as part of ERT and investigators also at the Khobar Towers. So if anybody's interested in that, they can follow this up with episode 16 with John Cosenza.
Right. We had 19 military personnel killed in that incident. That's why the Bureau was there. And another weird, sad event is as I processed the scene, as we processed the scene, we started at the roof and worked our way down, and to make sure we got every single solitary floor in every room. And one of the rooms that I walked into first belonged to a young Air Force captain who I found out later had was from the same town in New York that I was from.
Wow.
Which was very sad. He didn't go to my high school, but he was from my town on Long Island, and that was kind of sad and melancholy. But there are other times when governments will call the Bureau when we really don't have any jurisdiction, and that was another incident I worked. About 10 years later, in the Maldives Islands, in the Indian Ocean. And this was an incident where a 12-person Al-Qaeda-backed cell in the country of the Maldives. Maldives is a very small island nation south of Sri Lanka in the Indian Ocean, and it's absolutely beautiful. In fact, it was the best trip I have ever been on in my 23 years in the Bureau, 65 countries, 48 states. This was a great trip, because this nation is like a tourist paradise, and it was gorgeous. And this was the very first bombing this nation had ever had. They'd never had a bombing before in their nation's history. And as bombings go, quite frankly, it wasn't much. Okay, it was a very small device. In fact, the device may not have actually functioned properly, but 12 people were injured, 2 seriously, but none of them were Americans. You had 10 Chinese, you had 2 Japanese and 2 British citizens, and they were tourists. They weren't in a tour group, and they were touring a Central Park-like area of the capital of Malé in the Maldives. And a device was placed in the park. The device functioned. It was more fire than anything else. The 2 British citizens had some fragmentation wounds. They weren't seriously injured at all. In fact, I don't think they were probably gone by the time we got there. But it turns out that, if I remember correctly, their version of the FBI director was a brand new graduate of the National Academy at Quantico.
Oh, okay.
And he said, "Hey, I want the FBI out here to help us process this scene." Now, that annoyed the British, as well it should have, because 2 of their citizens were injured, and quite frankly, they should have been there. But the Maldivian government said, "No, we want the Bureau." So at that time, as you know, LA was responsible for everything up to India. And so we went out there. I went out there with a couple of guys from the explosives unit. One female from my evidence response team in Los Angeles, and the legal attaché in, I want to say it was India, Delhi. Okay. And the legat obviously was the liaison. The crime scene was practically done by the time, again, from coming from Los Angeles to Sri Lanka It's a 21-hour flight. So by the time we got there, it had been 48 hours. The 10 of the 12 suspects were rounded up. They were already in custody. And so they sent us out there to process the scene, in addition to what they'd already done. Again, this was the very first crime scene. They did the best they could. They were a very modern country. They had very, very good facilities, much better than I thought I would see. Okay, it was just like you'd rival anything in the U.S. because they got a lot of money because of the tourists. And they spend it on their police departments. They had very good facilities. And we processed the scene again. You can actually see, if you go on, this incident is actually on YouTube because it was filmed. A CCTV camera was watching the whole thing. You can see it on YouTube. I think the title is Maldives Suspects Captured or something like that. And you can see the Maldives defense minister, I think, in front of the television. He shows the videotape. And you can see the two suspects. You can see the victims walk past. You can see the device function. And like I said, by the time we got there, we had the luxury of seeing all that. And there was still stuff that they had missed from the crime scene that we picked up. They asked to use our lab to process the evidence. So we took the IED. I'm not going to get into too much detail about the IED, but it basically kind of fell out of the package and it was largely intact. So it was kind of a pretty easy crime scene to process. But towards the end, we were there for about a week and a half. Towards the end, our last night there, we had dinner with the high-ranking personnel from the police department, the military, and they invited us. They invited the four of us to go with them as they went. They were going to hit, the next morning, they were going to hit this island south in the island chain, and they wanted to know if they wanted to go with us. And of course, I went, "Oh, absolutely, let's go. We'll go." The League had said, "No, they've got flights. They've got to leave tonight." So the next morning, the police went down to this island, and a pitched battle ensued, a 40-hour standoff, several police officers injured. One lost a hand to a machete-wielding terrorist. And if the League had not told us, "No, we're not going," we would have been there. We would have been there watching the whole thing or involved.
Wow.
So good call by the League as it turns out, watching over us. But I would have gone, absolutely. You're going to roll up a Al-Qaeda cell? Count me in. But they said no. Cooler heads prevailed, obviously, and we left. But that was an interesting case. Like I said, the very first time, and they've had several incidents since then. I think they've actually had a coup in the Maldives since then. But that was a good trip and a lot of good liaison. And I actually gave a post-blast class to about 150 police officers who were brought in from all over the country on how to do it themselves the next time. So it was an interesting incident, an interesting crime scene.
Wow, Kevin. I mean, we've had the great thing about this podcast is, having the opportunity to speak to agents who have worked so many different things. I was a white-collar crime agent. I did mostly frauds and corruptions and, schemes like that. And it's just amazing to see what other people were doing. And yours is one of the most exciting assignments that I've had a chance to talk to somebody about. So why did you become an agent? What was it? Was it something that you always wanted to do? No, actually, no. I'd never really thought about the Bureau at all. I got out of college. I wanted a military career, and I went in the Marine Corps, and they told me how to blow things up, and I did my time in the Marine Corps, and I had a degree in criminal justice, so naturally I followed, like a lot of Marines do. They go into police departments, so I went back to where I went to college, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I applied to the police department, got in, and I stayed there for 8 years. About halfway through, I got on the bomb squad because of my demolitions experience in the Marine Corps, and I got to go to the Hazardous Devices School, which I said is in Huntsville, Alabama, which is the only civilian school for, police and FBI bomb techs. And I had some personal issues. I was going through a divorce, and I wanted to change the scenery. So I tell people I ran away and joined the circus. And
I had a buddy of mine in the Marine Corps whose wife worked at the Tulsa office of the FBI, and on a lark, I said, "Hey, give me an application," and I filled it out. And 13 months later, after the interviews, the whole nine yards, I said, this is totally different. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. This is totally different than when you and I came to the Bureau 100 years ago. It's much different now.
All online now.
Oh, yeah, it's all online now. We didn't have anything like that back in 1,000 years ago. But 13 years after I filled out that application by hand, I walked
13 months.
13 months. It took me 13 months from the day I filled out that application, dropped it off at Tulsa, FBI, and I walked into the academy on 9/9/90. That was it. So back in those days in the FBI, if you were already a bomb technician, you were kind of blessed to become an SABT. So they made me an SABT immediately upon graduation. My first office, however, was to Gallup, New Mexico. I went straight to the Navajo Indian Reservation.
Wow.
Right out of the academy. Because again, that's a lot of police work, so they sent mostly only ex-cops like me to those places. So I did 2 years there. I married my classmate.
One of those.
Yeah, one of those.
We had one in my class. Hey Ken, hey Mary.
Yeah, we met the first day of the academy. We got married in 1992. She was in Buffalo at the time, so I got a no-cost transfer to Buffalo. I spent 3 years in Buffalo. I worked bank robberies, reactive crime, and bombings. And I worked at my very first major bombing was the World Trade Center in 1993. I processed that one helped process that one for a month. And then in 1995, I worked the Oklahoma City bombing, and I was already under orders. We'd had it with Buffalo. No offense to my friends in Buffalo, but we couldn't take those winners anymore. And so the only way to get out of Buffalo was to either, back in those days, again, transfer to New York or L.A., where they, every 6 months they would have those. Please come to L.A., New York. We have nobody communications. So we volunteered for L.A., got out there in 95. And fell in love with it. I loved L.A. I miss it every day. It was a great place to be a bomb technician. And the management in L.A. was much more enlightened, for the most part, than other management. They allowed me to continue to do the bomb tech work, to expand the program. They liked the fact that I had such close liaison with the police departments. In the military there, we were very close. My dear friends, a lot of really great friends on the PD. In fact, this may sound terrible, but I had more police friends than I had FBI friends. Truth be known, because I dealt with them.
That's
sad. Yeah. Well, I was very rarely in the office. I was always gone. So my friends were all policemen and military guys. So, but I enjoyed it. It made me who I am, and I miss it. I don't miss the nonsense in the Bureau, but I miss the camaraderie. I'm sure you do too.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm doing this. In a way, I've been able to return to that camaraderie because of the podcast and the connections and the associations I've been able to make.
Yeah, and there are 4 or 5 people left in my academy who are still around. My wife and I retired the same day. We came in the same day. We left the same day. And but there's still a few of us still around. Some of the younger kids, like 23, 24 when they came in, they're still around. But all of us old guys and girls, we're long gone now. January's gonna be 5 years for us. 5 years we're out. That's amazing. It's gone so fast. So anyway.
Yeah, next year will be 10 years for me.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, I know. I'm really old.
Wow. I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, don't.
I know not enough to call a woman old. No way, I'm not doing that.
Don't say anything. All right, so I like to give my guests the opportunity to have the last word. So it could be about any of the assignments that you had, things that you want to leave us with when it comes to being a bomb tech, whatever you want to say.
Well, I've always told people that being an FBI bomb technician, being an SABT, is without doubt the best job in the Bureau. And the reason is No one knows what you do, and they're afraid to ask. So a lot of times they give you a wide latitude. They say, please don't blow yourself up. Please don't blow our vehicles up, and just do what you have to do. So any FBI guys listening out there, if you can get into the SABT program, anytime between now and the time you pull the pin, I'd highly recommend it. It's a great, great job. And you get to travel a lot of places. There's only one specialty that travels more than FBI bomb ticks, and those are the polygraphers. And that's because there's just not a whole heck of a lot of them around compared to the SABTs. But if you want to do some travel, see some exotic places, do some really great work, liaison with other organizations in the federal government and overseas, try being a bomb tech. It's not as dangerous as everybody thinks. Okay, if you know what you're doing, you will abide by your training, and you use your equipment the way it's supposed to be, you'll be fine.
And that's the end of the interview. As always, back at jerrywilliams.com, you'll find a photo of Kevin Miles, as well as a photo of the Khobar Towers crime scene, and links to several articles and videos about post-blast investigations, including that Maldives Al-Qaeda attack caught on surveillance video. If you enjoyed the interview, I hope you share it with your friends, family, and associates. I make it easy for you. At the bottom of the episode show notes, you'll find all the social media share buttons. And of course, if you're listening to this using a podcast app, you can share the episode directly from your device. I finally had the chance to finish the book that I was reading, The Black Marble by Joseph Wambaugh. And for those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that Joseph Wambaugh is one of my favorite authors. He writes police procedurals, what I like to read, what I like to write. And his famous line is that a good crime novel isn't about how cops work on cases, but how cases work on cops. I love that. So The Black Marble is about a burned-out former homicide detective in Los Angeles who gets teamed up with a twice-divorced female property crime detective with a grudge against men. These unlikely partners are assigned to the strange case of a stolen show dog being held for ransom. Now, the crime itself is not that sexy, but the characters are developed so well that I love this book anyway. So it may not be one of Joseph Wambaugh's very best books, but it is still a great police procedural. So you might want to check it out. And while you're at Amazon.com checking out The Black Marble, I hope you also take a look at my FBI crime thriller, Pay to Play, about a female FBI agent investigating corruption in the Philadelphia strip club industry. It's out in ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook. Don't forget, I will not be posting a new episode next week, October 6th. This episode was sponsored by FBIRetired.com, the only online directory made available to the general public featuring retired FBI agents and analysts interested in showcasing their skills to secure business opportunities. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you come back again for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. Thank you.